Couple of text messages that have come in. Someone telling me, what are my thoughts on the America's Cup being sailed in the Red Sea? Now we have a civil war in Sudan, which is on the Red Sea. Can you see security problems? I sure can, says John. Well, I haven't given any thought to actually the security issues. The America's Cup is going to be sailed in Barcelona, isn't it? Is that? Maybe I always thought I was pretty good at geography at school. I don't think the Red Sea is anywhere near Barcelona, is it?
You'd know better than me.
Yeah, sure. There's a civil war.
Could it be the fact that in the future, now I'm not good with my geography, as Martin likes to point out, is the Red Sea close at all to Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's in loosely speaking, it's in the Middle East, I suppose. But the America's Cup is going to be sailed just off the coast of Barcelona.
Yeah. But in the future, it definitely will be going to the Middle East, though.
Yeah. So I hope it's safe in Barcelona, because I've got a son who lives in Barcelona, and I was talking to him last night and he didn't express any concerns about it. He's telling me that the New Zealand community in Barcelona is really looking forward to the America's Cup going there. I mean, that's an issue. It's another issue, I suppose. And, of course, or maybe it's this regatta. There's a regatta being sponsored by Saudi Arabia, which has been coming in for some criticism by human rights groups here, saying that the America's Cup or Team New Zealand should have nothing to do with any sort of money coming into the sport of the America's Cup from Saudi Arabia. And I can sympathise with that point of view, but I mean, the problem is that when you start kind of pontificating on the evils of Saudi Arabia, of which there are many, absolutely there are many. One of my issues with Live Golf is that it survives entirely on the income from this regime, which has got one of the worst human rights records of any country on the globe. There was a day in March, I think, of this year or last year, where Saudi Arabia executed 81 people in one day, on one day. And a lot of the crimes were just unbelievably small and petty. So, yeah, I can understand why people have concerns about that, and so do I. But you can't have one rule for business and another rule for sport. Many New Zealand companies, I'm sure, have economic ties and company ties and sell products and buy products from Saudi Arabia, which you'd have to include into the same camp, I suppose, if you're going to be singling out the America's Cup. So I'd prefer if they didn't have anything to do with Saudi Arabia, but you've got to be, I suppose, a little realistic in this world. How much money the Saudis are putting into it, I don't know, but it is corrupt money because it's coming from a government which has very little to recommend it. Even the Americans have never been terribly fussy who they deal with, have issues around the human rights record of Saudi Arabia. But I saw Grant Dalton on television the other day, and he's being realistic about it all, and he's not being any different from a whole lot of other sports. There's been Formula One motor racing now once a year. They go to Saudi Arabia. There's Live Golf, of course. Women's golf goes there. Lydia Ko's played in Saudi Arabia a couple of times in recent years. There's a whole lot of other international sporting events, World Heavyweight Boxing Championships. So it is sports cleansing, as they say. It's an attempt by Saudi Arabia to try and cleanse and wash their filthy image they've got, which they fully deserve because of the way they've carried on in this field of human rights and the way they treat women in their country. And so they fully deserve all the criticism they get. But I'm not inclined to put America's Cup yet into that category. Someone else says to me, I worry about Super Rugby too, Brendan. Would be great if the South African teams came back and brought Japan and Argentinian sides as well. I think the commentary now is very average too. Hope it gets better. Great show. The South African teams won't come back. Unfortunately, they've cut their ties with Super Rugby and Sansa and seem very comfortable in the UK or in Europe. And it makes sense, I suppose, from the point of view that it's only 1 hour time difference and it's only a 12-hour flight, I think, really, from Johannesburg to Europe, as opposed to a considerably longer journey you have to make to get to New Zealand. So that won't come back. But if you ask me who I'd sooner see New Zealand teams playing, the Force, the Rebels, or the Sharks and the Bulls and the Stormers, I'd go for the South African teams, but it's not likely to happen. It is coming up to 23 minutes after 2 o'clock. More rugby league in a moment with our weekly correspondent, Zane Inglis.